Let's talk about reading in tabular data files. Now one thing you might want to do, and maybe I should do this for this video, is go to here, data, edit the GUI preferences. This is has nothing to do with reading tables, but I just want to make this bigger and showing you how to do it as well. So how do I do it? Here, make the font size bigger. Maybe that's too big? Well, maybe it's a little too big. Let's try 16. Okay. Now it looks like that. Maybe that's easier to read. Okay, now, so reading tabular data files. So let's look at some of the mistakes that I made trying to read in. So first of all, I know that there's something called file.choose, and that allows you to just, instead of having to type in the file path, you just allows you to pick the file. But I tried it, and it says error. It must be a file must be a character string or connection. So something was wrong here. So then I gave up, and I tried to type in the path to an actual file here, and then it gave me a problem. It said, no, it doesn't like it. It gave me this error. And then I remembered that you're supposed to put double slashes here. So I put in the double slashes here, and then it still didn't like it. And that's because this file that I'm trying to read right here is really a messy file. I'll show you what it looks like. Looks like this. And it's not like just a regular data file, right? It has text in it, actually, like this text here. So it's quite messy, and so it's hard for R to just read it directly, or at least you have to know what you're doing to get it to read it. So it doesn't like it, even though I did it this way with the doubles. Still gives me this error here. And I think what it wants in this case is, I'm not sure, it needs some of these arguments I didn't use, and maybe I need to use them. So first of all, I thought maybe it does. I realized that the function that I'm using to read this in is read table, or read.table. And one thing to note, if you're a programmer and like you use Java or something, this dot usually indicates that you're talking about an object property or something like this. Has nothing to do with this in R. That's completely irrelevant. It's just a way to write read table. That's all. So read.table, and so I'm using this function. It doesn't like it, and these are all the arguments, and I didn't use them. One thing I realized is that this was a CSV file, comma separated values file, and so I should write that the separator is a comma, which I did. I used that argument. It still didn't like it, and it said something about line 3 doesn't have, so it has trouble reading it because I have a lot of text in there, so it really makes it troublesome. And what else did I try here? Not sure if I just did the same thing. Oh, actually, well, anyway, it doesn't matter. So finally I remembered that, okay, it's better to use this function, read.csv, because this is a CSV file, and this somehow is like more focused on CSV files, so it probably is easier for it to read it. So I tried that, and it worked. So there was no blue here, no error message. So it just worked. So it gave me back another prompt. And then I know that this file has a column called followers here. And usually I think that if you, so if you do this, now I've read it into this variable called bitcoins. So now bitcoins holds that whole file. So I remembered that bitcoins $, and then you put the column name, you should get the entire column, or the entire vector. So it was, so I tried that, but it gave me null. I said, what's wrong with that? And I checked, and it should be capital F. So I went back and tried capital F, and then it actually worked. It gave me, they were all zeros in that file actually, and it gave me all of those zeros. Okay? Now I said, okay, wasn't there a file.choose? I saw that somewhere, so why doesn't it work? So I said, why didn't it work? And then I went and checked, and I saw, of course, I said, this is a function, and so you have to put the open and close brackets after it. So I did it like this, and now it works. Let me show you. Do it again. So it brings up something where you can actually choose. Let's see what happens. No, didn't like it. Again, because I'm using read table. But if I do read a different function, read.csv, which is more focused on CSV files, and then I do file.choose. Maybe this will work better. This part works fine. And this also worked fine. What's that? Okay. So it not only did it read it, but it seems to have printed it out as well. So that's all right, I guess. So, all right. Now these are all these things that I'm doing here can be so troublesome, or they have been for me. Let's try one more example. So I'm going to just put this into a file. Now these are not comma separated. These are tab separated. These are not spaces in between here. These are tabs. Okay? So you need to know that. So let's try file, save as, and let's call it statisticians.txt. I guess I don't need the txt there. And save it. Okay, so now I have this file. And now suppose I want to open this in R. This was not in R. This is just a text editor. It's like a WordPad or something like that. So now suppose I want to try and open that. Let's try it. Let's call it stat people. Okay, and let's say we do let's do the original one that we tried, read table, because it's not a CSV file, so it wouldn't work to say read CSV. And what would I call it? I called it statisticians.txt. Now one thing is, you got to put the path. Where is it located? I may not have to do that this time, but generally you have to do it. So let's see if I have to. Okay, so incomplete final line. Actually, for one thing is, I may be wrong about that. That file may not be tabs. It might be spaces, actually. But why doesn't it work? Statisticians.txt. Okay, it's so finicky. God, I don't know how we're supposed to learn this. It's so finicky. I had it like this before, and that seems pretty reasonable. But it complained about something, and so I just hit the enter key, which is actually, I would think that wouldn't work actually, but it actually wants me to do that. And then I resaved it, and then I tried the same command again, and it didn't complain. Okay, so it's not very easy to figure that out. Whoops, sorry. Okay, you can read that now, right? Okay, let me figure this out. Okay, so you can read that, right? So now it's read that in. Now I could try printing it. Let's see what happens if I print it. Okay, so it does that. what happens if I just write it? Stat p does the same thing. Okay. Okay, so it puts this and this around it, right? So it says this is variable 1, variable 2, variable 3, variable 4, like column 1, column 2, column 3, column 4. This is first row, second row, third row. So it puts that around it, but I don't think that's actually in there. But I wonder what would happen if I did this. Stat, oops. If I did stat p $ member and v1. I don't know if this works. Yeah, it does. So it does know that those are there. And let's try one more. v2. And let's try v3. Okay. Okay, now the levels means okay, that that just lists all the different possible values here. So Fisher, Pearson, Cox, Yates, Smith, or these here. So it's just kind of restating what are the possibilities here. Because here you might have Carl, Carl, Carl. You might have 5 Carls, but in the level it would just be listed once. Okay, but that's only when you have non-number stuff here. Like here, number stuff, and I did it v3. I didn't get the levels there. Okay, because numbers can be so many different values, right? You could have 1890.222222 or something like that, and so it's not going to list all of those. Okay, so now just to reiterate, to say it one more time, if the separator, like we had a separator before, if it's not a comma, then you don't use CSV, and if you use, so you don't use read CSV, you use read table, for example, but you have to specify what the separator is. So it could be a space, it could be a semicolon, or whatever. Now just to remind you, or to tell you, v1 and v2 are obviously not numerical, and they're called categorical variables, or also called factors in statistics and in R. They're called factors. Okay? And you can know that they're factors because it does give you the levels. So if they're factors or categorical variables, it will give you the levels. And we're going to learn about an important function called class, but just to we can apply this to stat p $v2, which we said is a categorical variable or a factor. And if we do the class on that, it's going to tell us that it's a factor. But if we did it on the third one, it's going to tell us that it's an integer. So it's treating these as integers, not as what's called floating point data or decimal point data, but as integers. I guess it stores it as an integer. If they're all integers, then it's going to store it as an integer, because floating point takes up more memory, so it's only going to use the minimal memory that it needs to, I guess. Now, if you don't want it to treat it as a factor, which I'm not sure why you would want to do that, you could do the following. Let's go back to one of our previous commands. We read it in. So when we did this, and let's do this, so you have to do comma to enter a new argument. You do comma and then strings as factor equals false. So that's if you didn't want a string to be considered as a factor, then when you're reading the file, you have to tell it that, or maybe you can convert it later also. So you do something like this. Now it reread it. So now stat p is different. Now if I apply that stat on the v2, now before it said it was a factor, but now it's going to say it's a character.